Bennett tugged at the hem of her borrowed dress, feeling every bit the imposter she was. The grand ballroom of the Sterling Plaza Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and women draped in diamonds that cost more than her entire yearly salary. This was not her world. She was supposed to be grading papers tonight, curled up in her small apartment with her cat Winston. Instead, she was balancing a tray of champagne glasses, trying desperately not to trip over heels that belonged to her roommate. Her friend Rachel had called that morning, her voice tight with panic. Food poisoning had knocked her flat. She desperately needed someone to cover her hostess shift at the charity auction. The pay was good, almost obscenely good for one night of smiling and serving drinks. With rent due in 3 days and exactly $47 in her checking account, the choice was simple, even if wearing this dress was anything but. She moved through the crowd with a practiced invisibility, the kind she had perfected over years of working part-time jobs to supplement her teaching income. Rich people rarely looked at the service staff, which made her job easier. She refilled glasses, cleared empty plates, and kept her head down, just trying to get through the night. And that was when she felt it. The unmistakable weight of focused attention. It wasn't the casual glance of someone looking for more champagne. This was different. This was a stare that made her skin prickle with awareness. He stood near the auction podium, a man who seemed to exist in his own private atmosphere. He was tall and lean, with dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on magazine covers. His suit was a simple, tailored black, the kind that whispered wealth rather than shouted it. But it was his eyes that held her. They were dark gray and intense, studying her with an expression she could not quite read. Chloe looked away quickly, her cheeks warming. She had no business noticing how attractive he was. She was a ghost in this room, a temporary fixture. She moved toward the kitchen entrance, eager to escape his gaze, but found her path suddenly blocked. He had crossed the room with a surprising, silent speed and was now standing directly in front of her. Up close, he was even more striking, with sharp cheekbones and a mouth set in a firm line that suggested he rarely smiled. "You're late," he said, his voice low and controlled, sending a shiver down her spine. Chloe blinked, completely thrown. "Excuse me? I expected you an hour ago." Assistant confirmed the arrangement. He glanced at a sleek silver watch that probably cost more than her car. The evening is already half over. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of his words. Who did he think she was? "I think there's been a mistake. I'm working for the catering company tonight." His eyebrows drew together slightly, the only sign of confusion on his otherwise composed face. "You're not from the Sinclair agency? The what?" Chloe shifted the tray in her hands, suddenly very aware of how close he was standing, of the clean, expensive scent of his cologne. "I really don't know what you're talking about." He studied her for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. It wasn't embarrassment exactly, but a kind of sharp recalculation, like a chess player realizing he had completely misread the board. "My apologies," he said finally, his tone formal. "I was under the impression that you were someone else." Before Chloe could respond, a woman in an elegant silver gown glided up to them, her smile bright and practiced. "Julian, darling, everyone is waiting for your speech. You can't hide by the champagne table all night." Julian, the name clicked. Julian Hayes, founder of Hayes Industries, the tech company that had revolutionized data security. She'd read about him in the business section, always pictured in boardrooms or accepting awards. Never at charity events, looking at catering staff like they were puzzles to be solved. "I'll be there shortly, Victoria," he said, not taking his eyes off Chloe. Victoria's gaze flickered to Chloe, cool and assessing, dismissing her in an instant before she floated away with a soft laugh. Julian reached into his jacket and produced a business card. It was crisp and white with minimal text. "Come to my office tomorrow. 10 in the morning." Chloe stared at the card like it might bite her. "Why would I do that?" "Because I made a mistake tonight, and I would like to correct it." His voice carried a quiet authority, the tone of someone who was always obeyed. "I need a curator for my private collection. Someone with a fresh perspective, someone who isn't part of the usual circles." Her head was spinning. "I'm an art teacher at a public high school," Chloe said slowly. "I have no experience with private collections, but you have a degree in art history from Columbia. You wrote your thesis on Renaissance forgeries. You interned at the Metropolitan Museum before budget cuts eliminated your position." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I do my research." Chloe's breath caught in her throat. How could he possibly know all of that? Have you been investigating me? I had you investigated the moment I realized my error. My security team is very efficient. He said it without a hint of apology, as if having strangers investigated was as normal as ordering lunch. The position pays $120,000 annually, plus benefits. You would work directly with me, cataloging and authenticating pieces for my personal gallery. The number hit her like a physical blow. $120,000. It was more than triple her teaching salary. She could pay off her student loans. She could stop working 3 jobs just to stay afloat. She could actually breathe. But something about this felt wrong. Men like Julian Hayes didn't offer life-changing opportunities to strangers they'd mistaken for someone else. There had to be a catch. There was always a catch. I need time to think about it, she said carefully, her voice barely a whisper. Fair enough, he turned to leave, then paused. And for what it's worth, I apologize for the confusion earlier. It was inappropriate. Chloe watched him walk away, disappearing back into the sea of elegant guests. She looked down at the business card in her hand, running her thumb over the embossed letters. Hayes Industries. Julian Hayes. What on earth was she going to do? Sleep did not come easily that night. Chloe lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while Winston purred against her side. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was too good to be true. Rich men didn't hand out dream jobs to struggling teachers they'd embarrassed at a party. This was the plot of a bad romance novel, not her life. But then she thought about her students, the talented ones who showed up hungry because their families couldn't afford breakfast. She thought about her own stack of overdue bills, the notice from her landlord about raising the rent again. She thought about the art history degree she had worked so hard for, now gathering dust while she taught Introduction to Watercolors to teenagers who would rather be on their phones. This wasn't just a job, it was a lifeline. When morning came, she made her decision. She put on her best interview outfit, a navy blazer and pencil skirt that had seen better days, and took the subway to the address on the card. Hayes Industries occupied the top 15 floors of a gleaming skyscraper in Midtown. The lobby alone was intimidating, all marble and modern art, with security guards who looked like they could bench press cars. Chloe gave her name at the reception desk, half expecting to be laughed at, and turned away. Instead, she was escorted to a private elevator that opened directly into a penthouse office. Julian stood by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city, hands in his pockets, looking every bit the powerful executive in a perfectly fitted charcoal gray suit. When the elevator doors opened, he turned, and for just a moment, something that looked almost like relief crossed his face. "You came," he said simply. "I almost didn't," Chloe admitted, stepping into the impossibly large office. "This whole situation is bizarre," agreed. He gestured to a leather chair near his desk. "Which is why I want to be completely transparent. I did think you were someone else last night. Someone I had hired through an agency for companionship at the event. When I realized my mistake, I could have simply apologized and moved on. But you didn't," she prompted, her heart thumping in her chest. "No." He sat across from her, his posture relaxed, but his eyes alert. "Because in that moment of confusion, I saw something. You didn't panic. You didn't try to take advantage of the situation. You simply stood there, holding your tray, looking at me like I was being ridiculous, which I was." Chloe felt a small smile tugging at her lips despite herself. "I have surrounded myself with people who want something from me," Julian continued, his voice softer now. "Money, connections, status, they perform. They calculate every move. They never just react honestly." He leaned forward slightly. "You did. And I realized I needed that kind of honesty in my life, especially for this project." "What project?" she asked.
Ice.
"I've been collecting art for years. Pieces I love, pieces I connect with, and they're all stored in a private gallery that no one ever sees. I want to open it to the public, create something meaningful for the city. But I need someone who cares about the art itself, not its investment value. Someone who sees the beauty, not just the price tag." Chloe looked at him carefully, searching for any sign of deception. All she saw was a surprising earnestness beneath his controlled exterior. He really seemed to care about this. "If I take this job," she said slowly, choosing her words with care, "I need to set some boundaries. Whatever you thought I was last night, whatever arrangement you had with that agency, that is not who I am. I am here for the work. For the art, nothing else." Understood completely, Julian said without hesitation. This is a professional position. My personal life and my professional life do not overlap. Famous last words, Chloe thought wryly. But she couldn't walk away now. She extended her hand across the desk. Then I accept your offer, Mr. Hayes. His hand was warm and firm as it closed around hers. Call me Julian. And welcome to Hayes Industries, Chloe. As she left his office that morning with a signed contract and a start date, Chloe told herself this was just a job. A wonderful, ridiculously well-paying job that would change her life. It was nothing more complicated than that. She had no idea how wrong she was. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to see what happens next for Chloe and Julian. 8. Let us know in the comments what you think Chloe's biggest challenge will be. Chloe's first week at Hayes Industries was a whirlwind. It was less art gallery, more government facility, with mountains of paperwork and security clearances. The private collection, I learned, was in this massive converted warehouse in Brooklyn. We're talking climate control and security systems that would make the Louvre jealous. Julian had been collecting for over a decade, sourcing art from private sales and auctions on 3 different continents. What I didn't learn, though, was anything personal about Julian himself. He was polite, but so distant. Our meetings were all about provenance and authentication procedures. And he delivered the information with the passion of someone reading a user manual. Honestly, I told myself I preferred it that way. Professional boundaries, right? Especially considering our first slightly chaotic meeting. But on my 8th day, everything changed. Julian asked me to meet him at the gallery after hours to start the initial cataloging. Showed up at 7 p.m. The warehouse district was eerily quiet, just the distant hum of traffic. The building was completely unmarked, just another industrial box. But when I stepped inside, it was like walking into another dimension. The main gallery was huge, soaring 3 stories high. Even as the sun set, light poured in through skylights. Paintings lined the walls, sculptures stood on pedestals. It was breathtaking. I recognized works by contemporary artists I adored, mixed with older masterpieces that made my heart race. And right in the middle of it all stood Julian. His jacket was off, sleeves rolled up. It was the most casual I'd ever seen him. He looked less like an untouchable billionaire and more like a man who truly loved the world he had built around himself. This is incredible, I breathed out, just turning in a slow circle to try and take it all in. Some of these pieces, thought they were in private collections overseas. They were, he said, walking over to this huge abstract painting. All blues and greens swirling like the deep ocean. This is a Rothko. I found it at an estate sale in London 3 years ago. The family had no idea what they had. I moved closer, just mesmerized by the brushwork. It's magnificent. But why keep all of this hidden? This art deserves to be seen, to be shared. That's exactly why I hired you. He turned to face me. The soft gallery light seemed to soften his features, making him look almost gentle. I want to share this, but I need to do it right. With someone who understands that art isn't just about investment portfolios and tax write-offs. We worked side by side for hours. I took notes on each piece, and Julian shared the stories behind them. His memory was incredible. He didn't just remember the price and date of purchase. He remembered the weather on the day he first saw a piece, the look on the seller's face, the exact way the light hit the canvas. The walls were coming down, not just in the gallery, but between us. It was past midnight when we finally took a break. Julian pulled out a bottle of wine from a small office, along with 2 glasses and a container of Thai food he'd apparently ordered earlier. "Did you plan this?" I said, laughing as I took a glass. "I learned early on," he said, pouring the wine, "that long nights work better with good food and even better wine." "Tell me something. Why did you become a teacher instead of working in museums?" I took a sip, thinking about it. Museum jobs dried up during the recession. By the time they started opening up again, I'd already started teaching, and I realized I loved it. Helping kids see that art isn't just in textbooks, it's alive, it's everywhere. "But you were struggling financially. Most teachers are," I said simply. "That's not exactly news." He was quiet for a moment, just staring into his wine glass. "I grew up poor. Not just struggling, I mean actually poor. My mother worked 3 jobs just to feed us. I built Hayes Industries because I never wanted to feel that powerless again." I was floored. Everything about Julian screamed old money, privilege. I would never have guessed. "That's intentional," he said. People respect success, but they distrust hunger. So I learned to hide where I came from. You're one of the few people I've ever told that to. Why tell me? Because you understand what it's like to love something that doesn't pay the bills. You chose teaching even when it meant struggling. It takes a different kind of courage than building a company. A warmth spread through my chest, and it wasn't just the wine. Thank you for saying that. We talked until almost 2 a.m. We talked about art, about our childhoods, about dreams we'd given up, and dreams we still held on to. I learned he taught himself to code at 12 using library computers, that his favorite artist was Caravaggio, not the modern masters everyone assumed. That he still visited his mom every Sunday for dinner, no matter how busy he was. When he drove me home, his sleek, expensive car didn't feel like a status symbol. It felt like a comfortable cocoon where we could just keep talking. He pulled up outside my modest apartment building, and for a long moment, neither of us moved. I should go, I said softly. You should, he agreed, but his eyes never left mine. The air in the car was electric, filled with everything we weren't saying. My hand was on the door handle when he spoke again. Same time tomorrow? We still have the entire second floor to catalog. I smiled. I'll be there. The next 3 weeks fell into a rhythm. My days were spent at Hayes Industries, handling paperwork and meeting with potential partners for the gallery opening. But my evenings belonged to the warehouse, to the art, to the quiet conversations, and to the slow, careful connection we were building that felt dangerously close to intimacy. I kept telling myself, this is your boss. This is professional. But it was hard to remember that when he'd show up with my favorite coffee without me asking, or when he'd laugh at my terrible art history puns, or when his hand would brush against mine as we looked at a painting and neither of us would pull away. My roommate Rachel noticed right away. You're glowing, she said one morning, watching me get ready for work. Please tell me you are not falling for your billionaire boss. I'm not, I protested, but my voice was a total giveaway. Chloe, sweetie, I love you, but you have the worst taste in men. Remember the musician who borrowed $500 and your laptop? The grad student who turned out to be married? Julian is different. That's what you always say, she said, her voice softening. Just be careful, okay? Men like that, they live in different worlds. Sometimes those worlds don't mix. I knew she was right. But knowing something and feeling it are two very different things. The gallery opening was just 6 weeks away, and the preparations went into overdrive. Julian hired event planners, caterers, a publicity team. I was suddenly in meetings with people I recognized from society magazines, all of them looking at me with a polite curiosity that felt more like an assessment. And then Victoria Sterling reappeared. I was working late at the office one night when the elevator doors slid open and she walked out, dressed head to toe in white, looking like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. So you're the new project, she said, her smile as sharp as glass. I've heard so much about you. I stood up, feeling instantly defensive. Can I help you with something? Just satisfying my curiosity. She glided around the office, trailing a manicured finger along Julian's desk. Julian has a habit of collecting things. Art, companies, people. I should know. We were engaged once. I know who you are. Then you know I understand him better than anyone. She turned to face me. He sees something shiny and new, becomes obsessed with it, learns everything about it. Then the novelty wears off, and he moves on to the next acquisition. Julian and I have a professional relationship, I said, trying to sound firm, but doubt was already creeping in. I'm curating his collection. It's all, of course, she said, her smile widening. That's what I told myself too at first. Just be prepared, sweetheart. When Julian Hayes is done with you, he won't even remember your name. She left as smoothly as she'd arrived, leaving me in the empty office with my heart pounding. That evening, I almost canceled on Julian. I typed out the text 3 times but couldn't send it. I went to the warehouse. He was already there, standing in front of a painting I'd never seen before. It was a portrait of a woman, painted in oils with incredible skill. She was in shadow, her face turned away, but there was something so lonely and lost in her expression. I painted this, Julian said without turning, before Hayes Industries. Before I had money for good canvases or brushes. I moved closer. It's beautiful. Sad but beautiful. It's my mother. From a photo taken the year before she died, his voice was rough with emotion. I was 22, working 80-hour weeks at my first startup. I was too busy building an empire to notice she was sick. By the time I paid attention, it was too late. My throat tightened. Julian, I am so sorry. I hung it here to remind myself that success means nothing if you lose the people who matter. He finally turned, and I saw tears on his cheeks. Victoria was right about one thing. I do get obsessed with projects. I lose sight of everything else. She came to see me, I admitted. She said you collect people like you collect art, that you'll get bored and move on. She's not entirely wrong, he said, stepping closer. The pain in his eyes was raw. I've hurt people by putting work first, Victoria included. But what she doesn't understand is that you are not a project to me, Chloe. You were the first person in years who has made me want to slow down. I'm scared, I whispered. You're my boss. We're from completely different worlds. This could destroy my career if it goes wrong, I know. He reached out slowly and took my hand. I'm scared too. My entire life is built on control and calculation. What I feel with you is neither of those things. What do you feel? He pulled me closer, his other hand cupping my face so gently. Like I'm finally looking at something real. Like maybe there's more to life than building empires and filling galleries with beautiful things I barely appreciate. My heart was hammering. Every rational thought was screaming at me to step back to protect myself, but I leaned into his touch. This is a terrible idea, I murmured. Probably the worst I've ever had, he agreed, and then he kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative. But then my hands went to his shoulders, and he pulled me against him, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home and jumping off a cliff all at once. When we finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. Tell me to stop, he said. Tell me this is just professional, and I will respect that. I looked up at this complicated, brilliant, damaged man. I thought about all the reasons this was dangerous. Then I thought about how alive I felt talking with him until dawn, how safe I felt when he looked at me. For the first time in years, I wanted something just because it made me happy, not because it was practical or safe. I don't want you to stop, I whispered. I want to see where this goes, even if it scares me. His smile was like the sunrise. It scares me too, but I think you might be worth the risk. We just stood there in the gallery, surrounded by priceless art holding each other. Outside, the city roared on, but inside, time was suspended, full of hope. I knew Rachel would call me crazy. I knew office gossip would be brutal. I knew Victoria's warnings might come true. But I also knew that some chances only come once. And Julian Hayes, with all his complications, felt like a chance worth taking. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more. See you next time. For the next 2 weeks, Chloe and Julian lived in a strange, secret world. In public, they were the picture of professionalism. During meetings, she'd call him Mr. Hayes. And at gallery walkthroughs with potential donors, she kept a respectable distance. She never let her expression give away the fact that she now knew exactly how his laugh sounded in the dead of night, or what his hands felt like tangled in her hair. But privately, they stole moments that felt like they were from another life entirely. They'd have late dinners in his penthouse, overlooking the sparkling city lights. On weekend mornings, they'd go to the warehouse and make love on the leather sofa in his office, surrounded by masterpieces that suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the way sunlight painted patterns across her skin. They had quiet conversations where Julian shared parts of himself he'd kept locked away for years. And Chloe found herself doing the same. She learned that he still had nightmares about his mother's death, waking up in a cold sweat, convinced he had failed everyone who ever mattered to him. She told him about her father walking out when she was just 9, and how she'd spent years trying to be perfect enough that people wouldn't leave her. They were both damaged, both trying to build something beautiful from broken pieces. But secrets have a way of demanding to be heard, and theirs was getting harder and harder to contain. The gallery opening was now just 10 days away. The guest list had exploded to include art critics, museum directors, philanthropists, and enough celebrities to guarantee a media frenzy. Chloe had thrown herself into the preparations with an obsessive focus. She was determined to prove she had earned this position through her own merit, not because she was sleeping with the boss. She was in the middle of reviewing seating arrangements when her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. The message contained a single photo, Chloe and Julian, kissing in the warehouse. It was taken through one of the skylights, from an angle that suggested a drone or a powerful telephoto lens. Her blood ran cold. A second text came through. How much is your dignity worth? Or should I ask how much Julian is paying for it? Chloe's hands shook as she stared at the screen. Before she could even process what to do, another message appeared. Meet me at Café Lucerne in 1 hour. Come alone. Café Lucerne was an upscale bistro in Midtown, the kind of place where big deals were made over expensive wine and meticulously plated appetizers. Chloe arrived exactly on time, her eyes scanning the room until she spotted Victoria Sterling at a corner table. Victoria looked absolutely immaculate, in emerald green silk. Punctual, Victoria said with a small smile as Chloe sat down. I appreciate that in people. What do you want? Chloe asked, keeping her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Victoria slid a tablet across the table. The screen lit up with more photos. There was Julian and Chloe leaving his building together, holding hands in his car, bracing outside her apartment. Weeks of surveillance, all documented with clinical precision. I want you to understand something, Victoria said, her tone almost kind. Julian Hayes destroys everything he touches, not intentionally, but inevitably. I know because I lived it. Chloe wanted to argue, to defend Julian, but something in Victoria's eyes stopped her. This wasn't just manipulation. This was real pain. We were engaged for 2 years, Victoria continued. It was attentive at first, even romantic. Then Hayes Industries started expanding into European markets, and suddenly, I was lucky if I saw him once a week. Dinners were canceled for conference calls. Vacations were postponed for acquisitions. He would look at me like he was trying to remember why I was even there. Victoria paused. When I finally ended it, he seemed almost relieved. Like I had freed him from an obligation he'd forgotten he even had. 2 months later, he started his art collection, another project to obsess over. Another thing to possess. I am not a thing to be possessed, Chloe said quietly. Are you sure about that? Victoria leaned forward. You were barely making ends meet as a teacher. Now you have a 6-figure salary, access to his world, his bed. Can you honestly say you're with him because you love him, or because he represents everything you never had? The question hit harder than Chloe expected, because she'd asked herself the same thing during countless sleepless nights. How much of what she felt was a genuine connection, and how much was just the intoxication of being chosen by someone like Julian Hayes? What do you want from me? Chloe asked again. Victoria smiled, a cold, beautiful smile. I want you to walk away before the gallery opening. Tell him you accepted another position. I'll make sure these photos disappear, and I'll even provide a glowing reference for your next job. You get to leave with your dignity intact, and Julian gets to learn that some things can't be bought or collected. And if I refuse, then these photos go to every major art publication, every society blog, every news outlet that covers Julian Hayes. Your professional reputation will be destroyed. People will assume you slept your way into this position, and nothing you accomplish will ever be seen as legitimate. Every article about the gallery will mention you as the teacher who became the billionaire's mistress. Chloe felt sick. She knew Victoria was right. The story was too juicy, too perfect for the tabloids and social media. It would define her forever. It would reduce everything she had worked for to a scandalous footnote. I need time to think, Chloe managed to say. You have 24 hours? Victoria stood up gracefully, leaving cash on the table for the drinks Chloe hadn't even touched. Choose wisely, sweetheart. Your entire future depends on it. Chloe didn't go back to the office. She couldn't face Julian while Victoria's ultimatum echoed in her mind. Instead, she walked for hours through Central Park, watching families play and couples stroll hand in hand, wondering if any of them had ever faced a choice this impossible. By the time she got back to her apartment, it was past 9. Her roommate Rachel took one look at her face and immediately poured 2 large glasses of wine. What happened? Chloe told her everything. The photos Victoria's offer, the 24-hour deadline. Rachel listened without interrupting, her expression growing more and more concerned. You have to tell Julian, Rachel said as soon as Chloe finished. He deserves to know. But what if she's right? What if I am just another project to him? Then you find out now instead of later. But Chloe, I've seen you fall for the wrong guys before. This feels different. The way you talk about him, the way your whole face changes when his name comes up. That's not about money or status. That's real. Real doesn't mean it will work. Look at what happened to Victoria. Rachel reached across the table and gripped Chloe's hand. Victoria is not you. Whatever Julian was back then, people can change. The question is whether you trust him enough to fight for this, or whether you're going to let fear make your decisions. Chloe knew her friend was right. She had spent her whole life playing it safe, always choosing the practical path over the passionate one. Teaching instead of taking a risk on museum jobs that might not pan out. Dating safe, boring men instead of risking heartbreak with someone who actually mattered. Julian had been a risk from the moment he handed her his business card. The real question was whether she had the courage to keep taking that risk, or if she would let Victoria's poison convince her to run. Just then, her phone buzzed. Julian's name appeared on the screen. "Where are you? I've been worried." Her heart clenched. She could picture him in his office, probably still in his suit, even though it was late, surrounded by work he wouldn't finish because he was thinking about her instead. In that moment, Chloe made her decision. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to see what happens next. See you in the next part. He was right where I knew he'd be. At his desk, tie loosened, exhaustion etched onto his face. The moment I walked in, a wave of relief washed over him. Thank God, he breathed, jumping up from his chair. Thought something had happened to you. Something did. I set my bag on the corner of his desk and pulled out my phone, showing him the photos, the ones Victoria had sent. Your ex-fiancée has been having us followed. She gave me 24 hours to walk away from you in the gallery, or she releases everything to the media. Julian's expression flickered from concern to pure fury. He snatched the phone, his jaw clenching so tight I could see the muscles twitching as he scrolled through the images. I will destroy her, he said, his voice quiet, which made the words even more terrifying. I will use every resource at my disposal to make sure she never works in the city again. Julian, no. I took the phone back. That's exactly what she wants. She's trying to prove you're ruthless, that you crush anyone who gets in your way. She's threatening you. She's threatening us. She's hurt and angry, and she wants you to see that what we have is just another business transaction to you. I stepped closer, placing my hands on his chest. I could feel his heart hammering beneath my palms. So I need you to tell me the truth. Am I just another project? Another beautiful thing for your collection? He stared at me as if I'd slapped him. How can you even ask that? Because Victoria told me what happened between you two? How you got so consumed by work you forgot she even existed? How you seemed relieved when she ended it? Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I need to know if I'm fooling myself. If this is real to you, or if I am just the shiny new thing that LL lose its appeal once the novelty wears off. Julian was silent for a long, heavy moment. He walked to the window, staring out at the glittering city lights below. Victoria is right about who I was, he said finally. I was obsessed with success. I sacrificed everything for it. My relationship, my health, any sense of balance. When she left, I told myself it was her fault for not understanding my work. But the truth is, I was terrified of being vulnerable. Work was safe. Love was a risk. He turned back to face me. Then you walked into my life because of a stupid misunderstanding, and you looked at me like I was just a man, not a bank account or a business opportunity. You challenged me. You made me laugh. You made me want to leave the office before midnight, just so I could talk to you about Renaissance forgeries and whether Rothko was overrated.
I am in love with you, Chloe,
he said, and his voice cracked on my name. Not because you're a project or a possession, because you make me want to be someone worthy of the way you look at me. Because when I'm with you, I remember there's more to life than quarterly earnings and market share. Now the tears were spilling down my cheeks, hot and unstoppable. I love you too. That's why this is so terrifying. I've never had this much to lose before. In 3 long strides, Julian crossed the room and pulled me into his arms with a desperate intensity. Then we fight. We go to the gallery opening together publicly. We refuse to hide or apologize. And if Victoria releases those photos, we face it together. My reputation will be ruined, I whispered against his chest. Then we build you a new one. We make the gallery opening so successful that no one can question your expertise. We prove that you earned this position. If people still talk, then we ignore them because their opinions don't matter. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple. It's terrifying and complicated and might blow up in our faces. He pulled back just enough to look at me, wiping away my tears with his thumbs. But I would rather fail trying to build something real with you than succeed at pretending you dainty matter. I kissed him then, pouring every ounce of love and fear and hope into it. When we finally broke apart, I rested my forehead against his. Okay, I said. We fight together. The night of the gallery opening arrived like a storm that had been brewing for months. The warehouse had been transformed. It was magical with dramatic lighting that made every painting glow. Servers wove through the crowd with champagne and canapes, and there were enough flowers to stock a small garden. I wore a deep burgundy gown that my friend Rachel had helped me pick. My hair swept up in an elegant twist. For the first time I looked like I belonged in this world, even if I didn't quite feel it yet. Julian stood beside me as the guests streamed in, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back. We'd decided to be honest, to let our connection speak for itself, instead of hiding in the shadows. The entire art world seemed to be there. Critics from major publications, collectors Julian had worked with for years, museum directors who could make or break a career with a single review, and somewhere in that crowd I knew was Victoria Sterling, with her poison and her photos. 2 hours into the event, I was discussing a Caravaggio study with a curator from the Guggenheim when I saw her, Victoria, making her way through the crowd, heading for the small stage where Julian was scheduled to speak. My heart stopped. This was it. The moment she would destroy us, in the most public way possible. But before she could reach the microphone, Julian stepped onto the stage. The room slowly quieted, all eyes turning toward him. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his voice carrying that quiet authority I first heard at the charity auction. "I've spent years collecting the pieces you see around you. Each one represents a moment of beauty, of truth, of human creativity. But I realized recently that I had been treating them like possessions, things to own and control, rather than experiences to share." He looked directly at me, across the crowded room. "Someone very wise taught me that art only has meaning when it's witnessed, when it connects with people and sparks something alive in them. She also taught me that the same is true for love." A murmur rippled through the guests. I felt my cheeks burn as hundreds of eyes turned to me. "Chloe Bennett is the curator of this collection," Julian continued. "She is also the woman I love. Some of you may find that controversial or inappropriate. Some of you may question her credentials or suggest she got this position through means other than merit. To those people, I say look around you." He gestured to the entire gallery. "Every piece here has been researched, authenticated, and arranged with expertise that exceeds anyone I've worked with in a decade of collecting. Miss Bennett has a gift for seeing not just what art is, but what it means. And if you can separate your appreciation of her professional accomplishments from your judgment of her personal life, then you are not the kind of people I want at this gallery anyway." The room was utterly silent. Then, from somewhere in the back, someone started clapping, then another person. Within seconds, applause filled the warehouse, genuine and warm. Victoria stood frozen near the stage, her face a mask of shock and something that might have been grudging respect. She met my eyes across the room, and slowly, deliberately, she nodded once before turning and disappearing into the crowd. The photos never appeared. I never knew if she destroyed them or just realized she had lost. But as the evening went on, as critics praised the collection and collectors inquired about future exhibitions, I felt something shift inside me. I'd spent my life afraid of taking up too much space, of asking for too much. But Julian had shown me that love wasn't about making yourself smaller. It was about finding someone who made you want to be bigger, braver, more fully yourself. 3 months later, I stood in the quiet gallery on a Sunday morning, reviewing plans for the next exhibition. The opening had been a massive success, securing my professional reputation. I heard footsteps behind me and felt familiar arms wrap around my waist. "I have a proposition," Julian murmured against my ear. "Another business venture? A personal one?" He turned me around to face him, and I saw a rare uncertainty in his eyes. "Move in with me. Not because it's practical, but because I want to wake up next to you every morning. Because I want to argue with you about whether we need more bookshelves. Because coming home to an empty apartment feels wrong now that I know what it's like to come home to you." A bright, bubbly joy rose up inside me. "That's a terrible idea." "The worst," he agreed, smiling. "We've only been together a few months." People will say I'm moving too fast, that I'm after your money. People will always talk. The question is whether you care more about their opinions than about what we have. I thought about the girl I was 6 months ago, struggling to make rent, wondering if she'd ever have more than just survival. That girl would have said this was too risky, too much too soon. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I'd learned that the best things in life come from the biggest risks. Yes, I said simply, I'll move in with you. His smile was like sunlight breaking through clouds. He lifted me off my feet, spinning me around as I laughed. When he set me down, he kissed me with a passion that still made me dizzy. Outside, the city hummed its endless rhythm. But inside, surrounded by beauty and possibility, we had created something rarer than any masterpiece. A love built on honesty, trust, and the courage to be vulnerable. It all started with a mistake, a case of mistaken identity. Instead of an awkward anecdote, it became the beginning of everything. And as Julian held me close, I knew with absolute certainty that some mistakes are just the universe's way of showing you exactly where you belong. Thanks so much for watching. You enjoyed this story? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. See you next time.